Hey, fam, and welcome to another episode on the Faith Flex podcast. I'm your host, your girl, Monica Roxanne, and I'm super excited that you decided to join me for another week as we bridge the gap between faith based principles and practical living. So, in today's episode, we're going to uncover the transformative power of thought and how they shape our reality. What is thought? And why is thought so powerful? And so, by definition, the word thought means an individual act or product of thinking or to develop an intention or plan. So, in essence, thoughts are the mental processes that occur in the mind, encompassing ideas, beliefs, perception, and attitude. Let me say that again. Thoughts are the mental processes that occur in the mind, encompassing ideas, beliefs, perception, and attitude. So, why is your thought so important to your reality? Your thoughts affect how you see a thing, how you perceive a thing, but it has a great impact on your behavior because as you begin to process information, thoughts are the very act of reasoning. So, what does the Bible say about the impact of thought? The Bible emphasizes the significance of thought and how thoughts impact our lives. And we can find that in Proverbs 23, verse 7. It says, "For as he thinks within himself, so he is." We know it also as, "So a man thinketh, so is he." And that really is talking about how you think, what you perceive, how you process information is so important to how you view a situation, how you view yourself, how you view others, how you view circumstances, because it could absolutely have an impact on your emotions, have an impact on your response and actions. It's really important to ensure that we take ownership of our thoughts. As we continue to think about our thought and our thought process, I think it's safe to say that we will have to be more diligent of what information we allow our minds to absorb. Because if we don't manage our thought process, it will absolutely affect our hearts. We know the scripture that talks about out of the heart, the mouth speaks. So if your mind has an impact on your heart, then it's very reasonable to say that we have to be very, very cognitive and very cautious of what we are subjecting our minds to, our thoughts to, because they will have an impact on our emotions and our heart. And we can really affirm that in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. It says, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, and if anything worthy of praise, think upon these things." When we look at the perspective of the impact of thought, it teaches us to guard our hearts and minds, for they are the well springs of life. Our emotions is driven by our thoughts. Our hearts are driven by our emotions. And it's important that we manage and guide our thoughts, our perspectives, and how we see ourselves. And if we are emotional, we take the time to self-reflect, and we take the time to be self-aware, to understand where we are and where we're going. Because what we don't want to see happen is that we allow our minds to play tricks on us. That we conjure up a situation or scenario that is either false or doesn't exist. But because we did not take our thoughts and the information that we've been either presented or given or experiencing under arrest, and take the time to actually process through it, then what we end up doing is allowing that information that is erroneous to begin to take up residence within our hearts and our minds and our soul. Romans chapter 12, verse 2 says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may be proved what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect." Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. This is not a one-time deal. This is not a one-time, one and done. Every single day we learn something new. Every single day we are exposed to something different. Every single day, we are presented with a new problem, a different idea, a new technology, a new situation. It is up to us to determine how we process the information. And so when we leverage our faith in our day-to-day walk, and we are presented with situations where they may not agree, or they may not align, or they may be different. The approach may be different. The principle may be there, but the methodology that we're accustomed to may be different. It is up to us to take the time to self-reflect. It's up to us to take the time to process the information in its authenticity as in which it was given, instead of making quick and haste decisions and making quick and haste judgment, or inserting ourselves in a space that we are the standard of living, and not taking the time to leverage empathy or to listen to understand. This is critically important because it's so important that we take the time to process our thoughts. And when we're presented with new information and a new problem and a new situation, it is important for us to take a deep breath and say, what is going on in this moment that is truly for face value, fact? Assess how we feel about the moment, which is always subjective because our feelings are like visitors, they come and go. But we have to ensure that we acknowledge that there's some emotional impact or emotional response. And then we guide our emotions with our thoughts, with our reasoning power, with our conception, to ensure that our emotions are truly aligned in such a way that it's appropriate and acceptable, that we are actually glorifying God, but that we also are seeing the situation in its true impact, not based on a trigger, not based on a trauma, but truly based on a specific incident in that moment. So again, renewing your mind is really important. Every single day, you may learn something new, and it's okay that your perspective may change. It may go from understanding something at one level, and then as you grow in your day-to-day walk, you realize, you know what, there's more to this. So you now have a new perspective, and that is what God wants from us, because he wants us to evolve. God's principle doesn't change. It's the methodology that may change because humanity evolves. And when we evolve, when we grow and we mature, if we don't, we miss opportunities. And so there's often this conversation that the world is changing. You're right, because humanity is evolving, or humanity is growing. But it doesn't mean that God's principles change, but maybe how we deliver the principles may have to change. And so, this is a great example. Many years ago, there were tent revivals. Now we're talking through podcasts and technology. Doesn't mean that the principles change, but maybe our methodology changes. The other thing that is important about understanding our thoughts, because we have to guard our heart, guard our mind, so that we are stewarding our lives well, because we understand that thought has an impact on how we respond. And I want to go with 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5. And that says, we are destroying arguments and arrogance raised against the knowledge of God. And we are taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. Again, this is an action. So in 2 Corinthians, it is saying that we're destroying every argument, all arrogance, anything that's above ourselves that goes against the knowledge of God. And we're taking every thought captive. Why is that important? Because we are going to be faced every single day with a situation, a conversation, an idea, a theology, an ideology that potentially will be contrary to our faith and our belief, or we may be in a situation that leaves us rejected or hurt or betrayed, which again puts us in a state that's contrary to God's word. And we have to take our thoughts, our mind, our emotions, and hold it captive and process it well, so that we don't make hasty decisions, so that we don't act out of character, that we don't say the wrong things. that we are not causing harm to ourselves and to others in such a way that it really changes and impacts our reality. What we want is that when we are going through these situations, good or bad, that we are actually acknowledging those situations for what they are, but we're doing it in such a way that God is pleased, and that we are doing it under the spirit of truth and integrity. So the power of thought and how it shapes our reality, we don't necessarily see it unless it's brought to our attention. Again, that's why self-awareness is so important. They can determine how we respond to situations, ultimately shaping the course of our lives. Our thoughts have the power to shape our reality by influencing our beliefs, our attitudes, or perceptions. So, for instance, there's this divide in the world about racism and black versus white and blacks versus other minorities. And it's all because of how someone perceived a thing, and then how we're not taking the time to really assess, is this division really kingdom? The answer is no. I think it's important that we think about how our thoughts really shape and influence our beliefs. The experience shapes how we process things, what we believe. We're in the middle of this presidential campaign, and there are two extreme sides in this campaign. We are choosing sides out of our own experiences, our own beliefs. So I want to make sure that we take the time and think about how our thoughts shape our reality. Assess where we are right now and think about, how did I get here? What are some of the things that I've experienced? What was my mindset at the time? If you're having a conversation with a person and it seems to be becoming a little interesting, take a moment to really and thoroughly listen to them, because they're speaking out of a place where their heart and their beliefs may be fractured. So take the time to think, okay, what is influencing their perspective? What is influencing their belief? What is influencing their attitude? Because at the end of the day, a lot of time is what we think. It is how we interpret situations, and it's how we respond to situations. And are we angry in our response? Are we passive in a response? Are we using our voices properly in a response? How we think drives every fashion of the humanity's makeup. How do we see a thing? It's the power of thought. Here's what I want to give you. Romans 12, verse 3. And it says, "For I say, through the grace that was given to me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but so to think as to think soberly, according as God has dealt to each man a measure of faith." Here's the thing. There's so much chaos and divisiveness and divide going on in the world, but I think we've missed this component. It says, "For I say, through the grace that was given to me, the extension, the mercy, the forgiveness, to every man that is among you, not to think of yourself more highly than you ought to think, but so to think as to think soberly, according to God has dealt to each man a measure of faith." So what does that mean? It doesn't mean to diminish who you are. That scripture does not mean that. What it's saying is, when we are in a situation where we're addressing people's feelings, emotions, thoughts, perceptions, ideologies, theologies, it is important that we present our thoughts, perceptions, or opinions in such a way that is not condemning someone or making yourself the end all be all to the situation, meaning that you are the only person that people have to measure their perception to. This is not what we're called to do. We are called to extend grace. We are called to share our thoughts and opinions, but we want to make sure that we're allowing people to be who they are based upon the measure of faith that God has given to every single person. When we see something, and we can say that metaphorically or actually physically, is that we process that information first in our minds, then it becomes an emotion, then it becomes written in our hearts if we allow it. So again, be mindful of how we leverage our thoughts and how we allow our thoughts to shape and um, influence our beliefs and attitudes, because we wanted to be very careful that we're not usurping or inserting ourselves in situations where we are the measuring matrix, and which does not allow for any other opportunities or stance. And that's not what God has called us to do. Why isn't it so important for us to take control of our thoughts? It's really crucial for us to take control of our thoughts, because they directly impact our emotions and our actions. And oftentimes, where we are right now, in the situations that we see throughout the world, unfortunately, all of the gun violence and the acts against humanity, our children, women, it's because we're not taking control of our thoughts. Negative and destructive thoughts can lead to feelings of anxiety, fear, despair. But if we have positive thoughts, constructive thoughts, they can absolutely inspire hope and joy and confidence. But it's up to us to determine how we're going to process the information that we are gathering in our day to day. So if we're walking in and it's chaos, we need to take a moment to process all the information that we're getting. First of all, does this situation actually apply to me? So if it doesn't apply to you, you may be able to give yourself a pass and not even be involved in that situation. But if you are involved, then your first thing to do is to listen. Make sure you do yourself a favor and listen, because if not, you're not getting enough information. And if you're not getting enough information, you cannot take control of your thoughts. And if you don't take control of your thoughts, then you risk the potential of having your emotions and your actions go rogue. All of that is connected. How you think is connected to how you respond and live in your everyday life. And as 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5 says, it says that casting down imagination and every high thing that is exalted against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity, the obedience of Christ. We have to take our thoughts into under arrest so that they don't control us. So what are some of the steps to process our thoughts properly? So these are just my recommendations. I hope it blesses you. But here's number one, and it's to be mindful. Practice mindfulness to become aware of your thoughts without judgment. So again, taking the moment to sit down and process the information that you are now gathering, that is now swirling in your mind, that's now trying to put the pieces together in your thoughts. If you practice mindfulness, you develop the strength to not only process information quickly, but you also be able to process the information properly. Practice mindfulness to become aware of your thoughts without judging. The second thing I think is important is challenge every negative belief. Challenging a negative belief and replace them with a positive affirmation grounded in truth. That's so critically important, because there's a lot of negativity in the world. Once we are presented with that information, our mind begins to process it. And if we do not take all our thoughts captive and start to weed out the negative that doesn't apply to us, there's no constructive impact, no constructive influence that's going to help us grow in the future, then we need to replace that with positive affirmation that is grounded in truth, so that it does not impact our emotions and it does not impact our heart. It does not impact how we respond or our actions. It's critically important that we do that we challenge every negative belief. And if you don't know where to go, then I encourage you to go to the Word, go to prayer, or find a mentor or friend that you trust their wisdom and counsel, and present them the situation or the thought or your perception, or have a good conversation with a thought leader so that they can help you to develop some understanding the influence and positive affirmation that will ground you in truth, because that's what's important. Next, I think is really important is to cultivate gratitude. Cultivate a spirit of gratitude by focusing on the blessings in your life. When we're trying to process our thoughts properly, sometimes it's just, this is a bad situation, but find the good in it. Yes? It's really important that we take the time to cultivate a spirit of gratitude. Because if we're going head first in a situation that's challenging, your emotions are completely out of control, all you see is red, and there's no positive in the situation, you're going to act aggressively. You're going to act out of sorts. And that's not what God has called us to, especially in this faith, he says, listen, take your thoughts captive so that you can bring every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. And that is looking at the space of gratitude by focusing on the blessings in your life. Now, that doesn't mean that you ignore the negative and what's going on, but you have to put the negative thoughts and the negative situations and negative people in their right place so that you can live a life that is full of blessing and joy and of peace. Cultivating a spirit of gratitude helps you do that. Number 4, I think, is also practice self-compassion, because when you're like myself, but you reprocess information every single day, all the time, every second, every minute. And I think we process like 4.4 million bits of information every minute or every second. And that's a lot of information. So practice self-compassion, be kind and compassionate to yourself, especially when you're going through challenging times, because we are human. We are perfectly imperfect. The God we serve created us out of brilliance, but we are still growing. We're still like toddlers and infants, where we're leaning on him. And the more we grow, the more information he can release to us, and wisdom and knowledge and understanding. But we also need to love on ourselves and says, listen, yesterday was my best day. Today might be a better day. And then we go back and do these varying tips of assessing where we are, setting goals, taking time out to practice mindfulness and to identify what's going on with the negative belief system and negative thoughts. Practicing self-compassion is important. Be kind to yourself, be kind to your others. And last but not least, I think it's a great way to process your thoughts properly is to seek understanding of your emotions. I think that this particular step is really critical. A lot of times when we are in a situation, we have to make quick decisions, and before you know it, your emotions are involved. When you seek to understand and the underlying emotions driving your thoughts, and you address them with empathy and self-awareness, you will find that you have a better response. And then all in the long run, your reality, your life becomes better, because you're not always responding first and then asking questions later. You're asking the questions right now so that you can respond properly. And with that, sometimes your emotions, your body is either responding, your mind's either responding, or even your heart is responding from some type of experience, some type of trauma, some type of memory that you have. And if you're not taking the time to really assess and understand your emotions and where it's coming from, then you end up being reckless and hasting your decisions, and your response may be aggressive or just unbecoming of who you are as a person. And we don't want that. We want people of sound mind. We are people of faith, and every day life is already challenging. We can't walk into life thinking that we have no control over our emotions. Being intentional and taking the time to really understand how you feel. So if you're faced with a really difficult situation and you're like, I'm really upset about this, the next question you need to ask yourself is why? Why am I upset? And once you figure out why you're upset, then you have to figure out, why is this now manifesting in this situation? Ask those questions. I always encourage people to ask at least 5 questions before you make a decision, because we know that feelings are like visitors. They come and go, but we want to understand why they're here, and to ensure that we are doing the right thing. So that's it. I think if we do those 5 steps, we are on our way to being able to take control of our thoughts, and in the long run, shape our reality in our lives and what we know that God has called us to do. So remember, practice mindfulness, always challenge negative beliefs, always cultivate a space of gratitude, practice self-compassion, love yourself, embrace yourself. You're not perfect. We all make mistakes. We all stumble, but it's taking our time to understand why and where we are and what we can do to better. But most importantly, take time to understand your emotions. It is so important. Your thoughts are connected to your emotions. How you see it, how you perceive it is critically important to your emotions. And if you don't take the time to process your thoughts, understand your emotions, those feelings will be recorded in your heart. And I always tell people that your heart is like a historian. It archives so many memories. And we don't want bitterness and resentment and rebellion and trauma and hurt to be written in this place that is like the bedrock of us. We want our heart to be full of joy and gratitude. And again, that doesn't mean to dismiss anything that's going on that's negative. That means we just have to ensure that we are working through each of those scenarios properly so that we make sure that what's recorded in our hearts and our soul is for the better of us. So thank you so much for choosing to hang out with me today as we harness the power of thought and align our minds with the truth of God and through his word. I hope that we experience transformation and renewal in our minds every day by taking control of our thoughts and processing them with wisdom and understanding. Listen, we can shape our reality, okay? Fill it with hope and joy and purpose. So remember to join me next week for our new episode. But until next time, guys,